Hi there, my name is Tyrone Thacker. I'm a First Nations man. I grew up in Lacombe-Pinoka area. My ancestors are from the Saw Ridge Band up in Slave Lake. I'm working in the agriculture industry, providing on-farm services to various types of farmers around central Alberta. This has given me the opportunity to be exposed to new and innovative farming techniques that I would like to bring to you. On this show, each episode will feature a visit to one of these farms. We will visit Verge Permaculture. Permaculture is a relatively new agriculture practice focused on creating sustainable circular systems that will produce food for centuries. Farm 253 is another permaculture farm in the early stages of its design, being developed by Travis and Deanna Thiessen. They are focused on growing and raising their own food without synthetic fertilizers and chemicals, using traditional holistic methods. Propelkin Farms is a mixed grain farm and cow-calf operation that focuses on growing all their own cattle feed. They are also part of a trial research program incorporating AI to help improve the quality of life of their cows during calving season. Steel Pony Farm is a high-output mixed vegetable farm that uses a subscription box program to feed their local population. They primarily harvest their produce by hand and pursue sustainability by utilizing local sources of compost to maintain soil health and productivity rather than synthetic fertilizers. Good Morning Honey is a large-scale honey operation in Alberta, focused on harvesting unpasteurized pure honey. Their operation involves thousands of hives, providing honey to markets in North America, Asia, and Europe. In each episode, we will learn what makes each farm unique and their long-term goals for sustainability. In this day and age, what's important to me is knowing where my food came from, how healthy it is, what my food is eating, and most of all, how it's being treated. The goal of this show is to highlight some of the innovative work that progressive farmers are pioneering in Alberta to develop long-term sustainability of local food sources. Today, we're visiting Good Morning Honey. Welcome to this episode of Innovations in Agriculture. I'm your host, Tyrone Thacker. Today we are northwest of Red Deer at Good Morning Honey. Good Morning Honey is a family-run bee farm owned by Richard and Amber Ozero. Richard, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you got into the honey business?
Well, this kind of purely by accident. I was living on an acreage at the time and I was looking for farmland because I thought farms were going to get really expensive if I didn't purchase one right away. So I was cold calling farmers, going all around the place. During that process, I ran into this one beekeeper who was a large scale beekeeper. I didn't really understand what he was doing at the time, but I got a few hints from him on who to go call, see if they had any land. So anyway, we bought this farm and then we were thinking we need some goats and some chickens and some sheep and some donkeys and I should get some bees. That would be pretty cool. This was back in 2006, before it was kind of a big hobby craze yet. Again, it had a resurgence. And so I went back to that fellow I had met and said, would you come put some hives on my property? And when you come and work them, I'll help you guys out, learn a little bit, and maybe in a year or two, I'll buy a hive or two off of you. So that's the direction we went. But in the meantime, during that 2-year transition period, my mentor decided to retire. So he said, you should buy my business. And I said, how? What? Tell me about it. So we learned about his business and it kind of intrigued me a lot. And so we came up with a plan for me to buy a smaller portion of his operation because he was running 12,000 hives, which is a big, massive undertaking. So we ended up going with 900 hives, which is still a very massive undertaking for someone who hasn't really kept bees on their own. And that's how we went from just bumping into this guy to eventually starting with a commercial scale beekeeping operational in a very short time.
That's interesting. So you were saying that you bought just a small fraction of the farm, and then so what has it turned into now?
So we have grown quite aggressively, especially in the first couple of years. We started off at that 920 hives, and then we have, in a matter of 10 years, grown to 5,000 hives now. So it's a pretty big exponential growth. It's come with a lot of learning, but yeah, it's probably where we'll stay, is right around this level. This is kind of maxing out at the amount of energy I've got left in my body.
Right. So you find like with the 5,000 hives, that's just a good sustainability for there?
Yeah, having that number in how I manage my operation gives you some wiggle room with potential for a little bit higher earnings or enough buffer room. If things go bad, you can sustain yourself into the next year. If we get much bigger, then you've got to be investing in more and more machinery, more manpower, more trucks, more everything. And I think we're pretty comfortable at this level, just trying to get it as good as possible, run this number as good as possible.
Interesting. Did you, like you stated before that he was running 12,000 hives or whatever? At 12,000 to 5,000 hives, do you use the same practices as he used?
So we started off out of necessity, just running a smaller version of what my mentor had, because he had been doing it for 30 years. He knew what to do with bees, when to do it, and he had the crews and the machinery to do it. So we had purchased, because he had an auction, we purchased all of his machinery. We overbought what we needed. We didn't need all this fancy stuff to operate the amount of hives we had, but it allowed us to grow into it and not have to start small and then trade that in and get something bigger. So the machinery side of things, we were able to easily grow into that with where we are now. And hive management, I've implemented and kept on using a lot of what my previous mentor had done, and it's really helped us get to where we are now.
And that would be nice that you had the equipment to like grow into the equipment rather than just be like, okay, like now what?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we would have wasted a lot of money trying to, do it the hard way and false economy of savings, thinking, oh, we'll just start out small and we'll eventually get there and then we'll buy some stuff. And whereas I bought what we needed at the auction, it was bolted to the floor. We operated out of my mentor's facility for the first couple of years until we could afford to build our honey house, and just transplanted everything, and we were able to just keep on going and run the operation as smoothly as possible with that transition.
Yeah. So I don't know if you could keep track, obviously, with the exact number, but could you give us like a idea of at 5,000 hives, how many queens or how many bees would that?
Well, we could roughly work through it, because you'd have to get your calculator out to do it, and it depends on what time of year, because the population inside a hive fluctuates. You have fewer bees in the springtime, and then they grow to a peak population in around July, August. So in a peak colony population, you have about 60,000 bees per every colony, and you have one queen. So if we've got 5,000 times 60,000, I can't do that many zeros in my head, but it's quite a few millions. And then 5,000 queens at that level as well. And then you're constantly working those hives. So there's a lot of bees involved in getting our honey into the jars.
Each hive has one queen. And so if you lose a queen or if you need to supply another queen, how do you go about doing that?
There's a few different ways you can do it. You can let the hive do it on its own, but the risk with that is that the new queen might be inferior, or it's a timing issue. Because in Alberta, we only have so many months of the year to get the amount of honey that we need to be a sustainable operation. So our real peak honey flow period is between July and the end of August. So you need that hive to have its biggest population as possible. If you let the hive naturally requeen itself, you have to go from that there being an egg laid, and it's going to be 3 weeks after that it emerges, goes from larvae to pupae to an adult bee, and then it has to go on a mating flight, and you hope it doesn't get picked off by a bird or something while the queen is out there doing her mating flight, and then she has to come back, and then it takes her a few more days, and then she'll start laying. So you could lose up to a month of time where you're not seeing a population growth. And so that will really impact your honey production capacity. Or you can buy a mated queen. There are companies all over the world. Most of Canada's queens will come from either mainland USA or Hawaii. They import thousands and thousands of queens every year and bring them into Canada. And that's where we get a lot of our genetics from, is from the US. You buy a mated queen, you put it into the hive, and basically she's ready to go, starts laying eggs right away, and you have that population continue to grow. Or you can make your own. So we've done that as well. We started making our own queen cells, but you can't start that process until you get a little bit later in the season here in Canada. So you can start having a queen that's ready to go from a Canadian stock in June, but we need to be supplementing that with the queens we'll buy from the USA. We start getting those into Canada in April. So we just can't physically, because of science and the cold weather and all that, we can't have our own Canadian queens early enough in the season for that first part of the season. We can only supply ourselves once we get into the middle of the season.
Another question I had was, if say that you have you grow your own queen or like a wild queen, does that make any difference in how many workers or drones that are attracted to the hive?
Everything that's in the hive is being created in that hive. Most hives, honeybee hives that are out there in the wild, or had its life start as a commercial apiary. They've just swarmed and gone off and started to live in a granary. Honeybees aren't native to North America. They were brought here in the 1600s.
So the most part they're like domesticated, and like you were saying, and like, so there's not like it would be hard to find a like honey out in the wild.
You could, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. There's places like other countries like Chile or something where their climate is, year round. There's something going on. You have wild populations of honeybees and different species of that.
So with 5,000 hives, 5,000 queens, and millions of workers, how much honey does that produce, like in a year?
It's really variable because it depends on the weather, but on average, and it depends where you are in the province, there's different averages for southern Alberta, central Alberta, northern Alberta. We're shooting for 150 pounds right now per hive. And we go pounds because we're so tied in with the United States, where in Canada, the industry, we deal in pounds instead of, volume. Like we don't say liters, because honey has different viscosity, and so the weight can be different and all that. But so when it comes to an average, you're hoping for about 150 plus. You can have a wild range from not making much, where you're like sub 100 pounds, to upwards of 400 pounds if the conditions are optimum. But that's why it's a bit of a you're a bit of a guessing game when you head into the first part of the season.
Right. Yeah. So it's 150 pounds per hive, and you have 5,000 hives. That's like 750,000 approximately pounds of honey a year.
Yeah.
And you have places for that to go.
Yeah, we do. Alberta is one of the biggest honey producing regions in the world. It's by far the largest honey producing region in Canada, and we fluctuate a little bit where we are, but we've been as high as the 5th largest producing region in Canada. But yeah, we have a lot of consumption of honey happens in Canada. The rest of it, we'll see Alberta honey go into Japan, into the United States, into parts of Europe, into China. So it's a known commodity. It has a sort of a premium around it, so it spreads around the globe. So there's no, it's not too hard to find a home for good Alberta honey.
So what are the primary markets for your honey at Good Morning Honey?
So we are part of the Alberta Honey Producers, which is also connected by BMade to the Manitoba Honey Producers. So we've got this collective group of farms in this cooperative where the marketing brand is BMade. So we'll sell truckloads to BMade, and then they'll market it throughout the entire world. So that's one avenue for some of our honey here at Good Morning Honey. Then we also do farmers markets So we have several farmers markets that we run during the summertime months. We also do weekly deliveries throughout the entire, a good chunk of Alberta. We ship honey by courier or by Canada Post. It'll go to all over the world. We've had customers connecting with us on the web. And then we have packers in other provinces who will buy our honey by the truckload or sea container full. And we have that in Quebec, in Ontario, in BC. We have large buyers who use it for mead making or other wines and stuff like that here in Alberta and also in Texas. So there's a large market where it just ends up finding a home. If you can produce good honey, there's always someone wanting to get that.
So Richard, Good Morning Honey promotes itself as pure honey. Like as pure honey, what does that mean?
Pure honey is honey that comes straight from the hives, goes into the jars, nothing added, nothing taken away, not highly heated, not highly filtered, where you're removing all of the goodness that nature has brought you to that point. So that's what we focus on, is trying to give our consumers, our customers, the most authentic honey that you can get right from the hive into the jar. So we focus on pure honey because honey is one of the most adulterated foods on the planet. It's in the top 10, I think. So there's the chance of having honey, we'll put the air quotes on that,
right,
coming in from other countries that isn't even honey. It's rice syrup, it's all kinds of other things that are, it's just a way where people are trying to make money off of a very natural, beautiful product. And as beekeepers here in Canada, we're trying to promote the most natural, the most real honey you can get, and try to beat that fraudulent market back and keep that out of Canada.
So Richard, what are your priorities for producing like good pure honey?
I want it to be authentic. I want it to be from hives that I've had a hand in helping raise. I want it to be from my farm, and I want people to understand that it's real honey, no ingredients added, nothing taken away, no funny business. We have a lot of junk coming in from other countries that are trying to game the system, and as a honest broker, you can't compete with that. They're not dealing with labor costs, they're not dealing with the proper safety protocols for food safety. And we do, and we take that very seriously, not only here at Good Morning Honey, but all beekeepers in Canada. We have strict food safety protocols that we have to follow. And I just want to make sure people are getting the best honey they can get in that jar, honestly. Our honey, we're calling it pure on our label because we're doing what we can to take it from the hive, minimal processing, just basically removing it from the frame and getting it into the jar without high heating or filtration or anything that takes away all the goodness that the bees and Mother Nature have put into that.
Yeah, perfect. How have you structured your operation to achieve sustainability?
We focus on the people we have on our team. We try to keep the same group of people that has the same ideology of working hard, working these long hours for a short period of time to make the best product you can have. When you have those basics, the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. When everyone believes in what you're producing, it makes the job a lot easier. We focus on not trying to get too big, not trying to be everything for everyone. Just create this great honey that tastes great, no corners were cut. Just focus on getting the job done. Try to be efficient as possible so that you're not wasting money, but really focus on that wonderful honey. Looking back, one of the things that really got me into beekeeping was the environmental impact of bees. Now that I understand it more, I know how integral they are to modern agriculture.
As a beekeeper, how do you manage your relationship with nature?
With respect. You really have to listen to Mother Nature. If you think you're gonna outsmart what those bees who have been doing this for millions of years, you're gonna fall flat on your face or lose your shirt. Nowadays, you have to listen very carefully to what Mother Nature is telling you. You have to try to move away from the dogmatic scientific thinking of let's throw more chemicals at this, let's throw all the stuff that we don't need. The bees can tell you what they need very simply if you pay enough attention. You have to be more hands-on with your hives now. In the past, it used to be easier to keep bees, but as the progress happens with humans, we have more industrialization, more urbanization. You're losing the diversity of natural lands, and you're seeing more monocrops. You can't go back on any of that stuff, so you got to figure out, how do we fit in there? How can we preserve what we need to preserve? How can we work with what we have? How can we give the bees what they might be missing if we're taking something away over here from other things that humanity's doing? What extra management technique do we have to have? Do we have to be supplementing their diet with amino acids? Do we have to be getting them more water in drought times? You just really have to listen to Mother Nature and be ready to move very quickly and help those bees and see what's going on in that hive and work with them. You have to really pay attention to what's going on inside that hive and be ready to help with nutrition or genetics of the bees. Just really be hands-on. It's become vital to the beekeeping industry. Things are changing every year with the way, is it too hot? Is it too wet? Is there too much smoke? All those variables have really put a pressure on beekeepers and bees over the past, I'd say, 10 years. So you really have to think on your feet. With beekeeping, it seems like we were kind of the last at the table when it comes to the scientific research that was done. If you look at other industries like the cereal crops and beef and everything like that, there's been so much research because it's such a big industry. So for a long time, beekeeping has been thought of as this romantic ideal, this thing you do, the lone beekeeper sitting in his field, while the rest of the agricultural community was exploding with science and technology and all this research, and billions of dollars went into the beefs and the cereal crops and all of that kind of stuff. And we kind of got left behind. Now we've got to, as we're having more and more natural pressures on beekeeping, we've got to catch up. So we've got lots of understanding to do. A lot of the beekeeping research was done in the 1800s and a little bit in the 30s to 50s. We've seen a resurgence in scientific research going into bees, so we can understand exactly their nature and try to solve some of the problems we're seeing in the beekeeping industry right now. One of the biggest problems we have that's working against bees that have caused a lot of issues for beekeepers is the varroa mite, which is this little mite that burrows into the side of a bee's body, and it's sucking the fat bodies, the energy out of the bees. And it's also, that mite is a vector for other diseases and viruses that get transferred into there. So we're trying to keep that mite population down, keep them out of the hive so the bees can maintain their health. So that's a new thing that's crept up in North America since the 80s. And we still haven't solved that problem. We've had a few tools in our toolbox. They work for a while, then they die off, or there's resistance to that tool. So that's one of the biggest threats to beekeeping right now. If you can get back on top of that varroa mite, then we could easily keep bees healthier. We just need to help them that way.
That must be small. Where do they pick that? Like, is it just like something that's around?
No, it came into the country from, it was in other, I don't know where it started. I think it was in Asia. And some of those bees have since developed some immunity to, different sizes of bees, different things have happened, and those bees have worked their ways into having resistance to that, and then there's hygienic behavior where the bees will groom themselves and or chomp on the mite or kill it like that. But in North America, from what I understand, we can't just let that happen naturally, because we'd lose way too many bees, and the industry would just collapse if we just said, well, let's see what happens over the next 6 years.
Right.
Let's see what the bees do. You'd be stuck with no one in business anymore, because just for all that evolution to happen would be tough. So we've had synthetic chemicals over the years that worked against the varroa. We use here, Good Morning Honey, we use organic acids like formic acid, which comes from ants. and we sort of fumigate the hive with that, and it's not hard on the bees. It can kill the mites, but you can only do it at certain times with temperature, and if there's honey on. You can't do a lot of these treatments. You can't do when there's honey on the boxes, surplus honey, because it'll affect the quality of the honey. So you're stuck with this timeline, this tight windows where you can apply. And what if you're having really cool wet weather? Then that the tool you thought you were going to use isn't going to work anymore. You know, things like that. Or it's too hot, like with formic acid. If you put it on, it's 30 degrees outside, then it harms the bees. It's too hard. It can kill the queen or stop her from laying for 3 weeks. Or you know, so you're stuck. Before, we had these plastic strips, and you'd put them in the hive, and they had this one chemical on them, and it worked well, but and it worked longer than other treatments had worked, but it really ended up, you know, getting some resistance, and now it's still expensive and doesn't work. And then, we're using oxalic acid, which seems to be effective. We still don't know the mode of action that kills the mites, but it's very laborious. You've got to do 5 treatments 5 days apart, and they're all 20-second treatments. So you add that up where you're doing this and physically having guys go out there and
over 5,000 hives.
So you run into those kind of things.
And I like the using ants to help there, because I really like ants too. So what are some obstacles of being a beekeeper that you are faced with every year?
Every year is a different kettle of fish, or ball of wax may be more appropriate. You know, weather is a big thing. You're always having to work with nature. Some of the big issues that beekeepers face: environmental conditions. It might be too rainy, too hot, too dry, too smoky, as we've mentioned. All those things, you have to manage your hives differently. There could be a lot of external factors, political, adulterated honey coming from other countries, making its way into Canada, labor issues. The biggest challenges to beekeeping right now are weather patterns and also disease management. So those are 2 big factors. It's all Mother Nature stuff that you can try hard. There's some things that are out of your control, and you have to be able to roll with the punches on those. So with the weather, you can really have different springs. Like, it can be too cold in the spring, and that'll change what you do. You have to really be able to maneuver quickly to be able to give the bees what they need. Is it hot outside? Is it too hot? Is it too cold in the spring? Is it too wet at the wrong time of year when the bees are supposed to be out during the summer and gathering all that nectar from the flowers, when that's the 2 weeks where the flowers are going to be doing their thing? And if it's raining all that time, the bees can't go visit them. So there are so many things that are out of control when it comes to, out of your control as a beekeeper when it comes to beekeeping, that you really have to think on your feet and be ready to really grind it out with your little windows of opportunity to work with those bees to get as much quality honey as you can that year. Hey, it's Richard. We're gonna go check on some hives. We'll visit one of the yards we have with a bunch of bees in it, see how they're doing. The guys are taking in the last of the honey for the season. Just wanna get a feel for how the bees are looking as we're getting prepared to get everything ready for winter. We have about 125 different sites with different farmers and landowners spread throughout the county. And we have about anywhere from 16 to 40 colonies in every different yard that we have to tend to on a regular basis during the peak of the season, which is basically from March till October. The job we're getting done today is stripping the remaining honey boxes from all of the bees that are in certain yards. So what we're doing is they've been collecting honey all year long. Now as we're getting ready for winter, we're taking the last of the honey that we're gonna harvest and leave them some time to collect some more honey for themselves so they can prepare their pantries so that they have enough winter food stores to make it through until springtime. And then we'll start worrying about making sure that they're in good shape and getting ready for the winter. So we have to put an entrance block on the hives, which is a little strip of wood that kind of reduces the size of the entrance where the bees fly into. That helps them defend their hives from wasps at this time of year. It also cuts down on how much heat is escaping out of the hive, so they don't have to work as hard to generate heat to keep their house warm. So those are some of the things we're looking for. We're just tidying up the yard. One of the big things we're looking for in the fall time is one of the main threats to the honeybee industry, which is the varroa mite. It's a mite that feeds on the fat bodies or the energy reserves of the bees. And these mites have been kind of building up all summer long. There's not a lot you can do during the summertime to treat for these because you have honey supers on there. So most treatments would affect the honey quality. So we have to wait until we're done harvesting the honey, and then we have to help get rid of these mites for the bees, because these mites can really take a toll on the bee population and wipe it out on a pretty short order, or by the time we get into next spring, you go and see what survived over winter, and it could be devastating. One thing I'm noticing, there was something a little bit off looking about this hive, and you can see as soon as I crack the lid, there's lots of wasps around, walking around. No honey stores in the top box, no honey stores in the bottom box, and you look and there's no bees in the bottom, but lots of wasps and yellow jackets and hornets crawling around there. And if you look at the front here, there's pollen here. So they've been inside there. They overpowered the hive that was here, and they've scavenged a bunch of food resources out of there, so they're just making a meal out of this poor colony. You can see the remnants of what's going on here, just this pollen being pulled out of here and all the resources being scavenged by the pests. Nothing, this is just a lost cause. The hornets and the wasps won out on this one. They overpowered the bees that were living inside here and got the upper hand and wiped out this colony. So it's just a loss for the bees and a loss for the beekeeper. Well, let's take this back to the truck and see what, oh, look at the bottom board here. Just covered in all the pollen and everything that's been taken out of this hive here. So the wasps are just having a field day with that. That's a lot of lunch for them. But it was obviously some hard-fought battles, because there's a lot of dead wasps in this corner here. So the bees put up a good fight, but couldn't make it. One thing we can do to help the bees out at this time of year is put on an entrance reducer. So right now they have to defend this whole area here, and they're also losing a lot of heat as the nights get cooler. So if we put this entrance reducer on, now this is the space that is available for the bees to go in. Also, that's the tiny door they have to defend now to keep the wasps out. So this tells me that it's red, so that means it was from last year. That was the color of queens. We mark the queens. Every year has a different color. It goes on a 5-year rotation. Last year was red for 2023. So I know that this is a queen from last year. And on the hive next to it, there's a green tag. So that tells me this was a new queen from this season, and tells me where it came from. I've got codes for all the different queen breeders, and we also breed our own queens. So just to help us keep track of what's going on in this yard and the age of the hives.
With the experience you've gained over the years, what are some techniques that you've developed to manage the changes in weather and environment?
There's not a lot you can do. One of the big things you can do is get super organized. Try to not leave everything to the last minute. Do more stuff in the winter that can prepare you. So usually you would have some time in the summer where you'd be building new equipment when there's a bit of a lag between jobs with the bees. But if your timeline changes in that spring or summer, and now you should have been paying attention to the bees instead, everything flips on its head and you can get behind really quick. So try to be organized so that you're ready for whatever comes your way.
And as you were saying before about, we'll call it disease management, how do you go about that?
You have to constantly be taking in information. Every year here in Alberta, we have what we call as an integrated pest management course. So beekeepers from all over the province will gather, hear from scientists, the latest developments, theories, what you can do, things to keep on your radar that you might be concerned about in the future. And you talk to other beekeepers who are managing their operations, and you try to figure out what do you think our best strategy is going to be this year. What are the new elements that we should be concerned about? So it's really just an ongoing educational element to beekeeping, that you can't just, well, I did it that way last year, or my dad did it back like that, or my granddad kept bees like that back in the 50s. I'm just going to keep doing what he's doing. You can't do that. You can't stay still in beekeeping. You constantly have to be evolving and doing your very best.
Richard, how much do environmental conditions affect your output with honey each year?
Pretty dramatically. It really depends on the moisture you get at what time of year. Depends on if there's a drought situation. The flowers do different things. May not be producing the nectar. They may be preserving their viability in their roots instead. So you're not going to be able to get the honey you thought you were going to be able to get. Or it could rain at the wrong time of year, or you could get crops hailed out at the wrong time of year. So anything that impacts other areas of agriculture for their yields also impacts honey yields. So it's agriculture is very entwined with beekeeping. I find also bees are have become an integral part of modern agriculture. As we change our landscape so much with urbanization and bigger farms, you end up getting some natural pollinators displaced, or they leave the scene. Now you're even more dependent on honeybees, managed honeybees. So yeah, I think weather is a crucial part of all agriculture, and it's no different for honeybees.
And another environmental question, I've noticed when you harvest honey, you smoke.
Yeah.
So with the last couple of years, how we've been struggling in Alberta with the wildfires and stuff like that, how has that affected production?
There's a few different things that happen to the hive when you have the forest fire smoke rolling over your area. So it does do something to the plants themselves. They may halt their yield of nectar as they're trying to preserve themselves. They're not getting the trigger from photosynthesis and all that from the sun because of the smoke blocking the UV rays and all what's happening there. And also it affects the bees. They use a bunch of different tools for navigating. If it's super smoky out and they can't get some of their tools that they regularly use to find their way back to the hive, they venture out a lesser distance. So they kind of just stay close to home, and once all that nectar is depleted, there's nothing more for them to bring in and convert into honey. So you're kind of at the mercy of the smoke. It really impacts your yield of honey if it's happening during the high production season, which it usually is.
So what can you expect is like range of outputs for your honey?
It can be from awesome, I can afford to keep on beekeeping, to, oh no, what are we going to do? You can have a range of production capacity that is so varied in a year because of all kinds of different factors. So you really have to be able to manage as efficiently as possible without cutting the corners, because sometimes parts of Alberta will be great. They'll be having a booming or even an average crop, whereas southern Alberta might be going through a flood or a drought that year, and they've got almost no honey production happening. So depending on where you are in the province, even within a municipality, you can see big changes depending. So honey production is a hard thing to calculate, but it is kind of a numbers game. You're hoping for your averages, but they can vary quite a bit towards disappointing to happy.
Can you give us an example of like your best year and your worst year? And
so the best year we've had for honey production was about 225 pounds per hive, and we've also been below 100 pounds per hive. So that is an enormous gap that you can have in beekeeping, and that's all dependent on weather and bee health. So there's a lot out of your control, and it can be intimidating at times.
so while driving around Alberta, I see hives all over the place. Is there a strategy on hive placement?
Of course, yeah, you have areas that are great for bees and areas that aren't so great for bees, and you got to take a lot of variables into consideration. For me, I like to have protection from north and west winds, so if storms are blowing through, you got some tree protection. You want to have some moisture around. Bees drink, they need their water as well, so you want to have some kind of water source nearby. You want to have the right amount of forage opportunity for the bees. A lot of farms, you'll have different fields around where the bees are, and you want to be able to know that every year there's going to be something within that fly zone that they can harvest. If it's changing from canola to wheat or to potatoes or something, that at least there's going to be another field nearby that is good for bees harvesting some nectar to make the honey. So some of the yards that I have been beekeeping yards for over 100 years. They start and they pass to the next beekeeper, the next beekeeper. Some of these places are centennial farms where the people that have owned the land have been there for more than 100 years. Sometimes those change as well. We like to use the last name of the farmer as to identify our bee yard sites. You want to have an early source of pollen. So we like to not only just have trees to block the wind and the rain, you also want to have some early blossoming trees like willows and poplars. They'll provide a source, an important source of pollen and a little bit of nectar in the early spring. So that helps the bees get their jump start on the season to sort of trigger growing the hive. And then the other part is you want a good source and variety of flowers around within like a 2 to 7 kilometer radius of the hive, so that they always have something year to year to visit and make your honey.
Can you give us an overview of the season for a beekeeper?
Yeah, it really starts, the beekeeping part starts in March, by the end of March. You start visiting the hives, see what has survived through the winter, start giving some additional nutrients, some pollen supplements to the bees so that they have something to sustain them in case April has some winter storms or anything like that where they won't be able to get out. So you've got some extra supplements just to tide them over if they need it. Then once you get into April, you start unwrapping these insulated blankets that we've put around the hives to keep the elements out. And then once you get into May, you start seeing the hives really start to grow as you have your dandelions start blooming. That's a real trigger for the season to bang, get underway. So you see these huge population growths at that time. And as a beekeeper, what you want to do is take those strong hives, split them into two, add a new queen to the new one that you made, put it in a new location, and then so you're managing this growth as it's really starting to swell. Into June, you start adding more empty boxes that the bees will start to put all the honey into, this surplus honey that they're starting to make in June. And then you're really stacking those boxes on as you go through the month of May and June and into July, about middle of July. That's when you start to harvest. That's when you'll have some really heavy boxes. You take those back to your honey house, you harvest the honey out of those boxes, and you quickly get them back out into the field so the bees can continually start filling those up again. And you're just, this whole process of extracting the honey goes from that middle of July till about beginning to middle of September, depending on how the weather goes. And then you start thinking about winter's coming. May not feel like it now, but we've got to get these bees ready and stripped back down so they only have their 2 boxes left in the field that they live in. We call those the brood boxes. That's where all the babies are laid. That's where they store their surplus honey for the winter. And then we get them all wrapped up. And by, first week of October, second week of October, we're done. And in that last part of the season as well, you're treating for your mites. You're doing, trying to really knock down the mite population in the fall. You're also trying to do that in the spring. So those are 2 key things I missed, but those are sort of bookend the season with that. And then after that, it's marketing your honey. It's going to conferences where you meet all your buddy beekeepers and see how they did. Was it a good year? Was it a bad year? You've got conventions to go through in other parts of the world. You have farmers markets you may be doing delivery. So it stays busy all year long, but the bulk of a beekeeper's busy season is from March till October. It's go, go, go time. Within those several months, you fit a year's worth of work. So it's a long, drawn-out season.
Richard, can you give us just a brief description on what the inner workings of like a beehive is? Because I noticed there's boxes stacked up. So
yeah, the first 2 boxes are what we call the brood boxes. That's where the queen lays the eggs. That's where everything is. It's kind of their house. And then all the boxes above those are called honey supers. Honey supers is where the surplus honey is being stored. It's kind of like a pantry. So as a beekeeper, your job is to first focus on those 2 brood boxes in the early part of the season and make sure the hive is healthy and everything's good, the queen's laying her eggs. And then after that, you're giving them room to grow so that they don't feel pressure to swarm. You give them more space and they'll start adding honey, and then you add another box and you wait until you have all of these boxes full, and then you'll go harvest that honey and replace it with some empty boxes. But those first 2 boxes always stay there. That's their living quarters. The goal of a beekeeper is to help that hive grow. The queen is laying up to 2,000 eggs a day once the whole system starts in the spring. And that gives you this exponential growth of bees to get you from 10,000 bees that have survived throughout the winter, and then that population just grows. So you have bees, like worker bees live about 6 weeks once you get into summertime. So you have to have a healthy queen that's outlaying that mortality of those bees. So you go from a hive of 10,000 to a hive of 60,000 by the queen just pumping out those eggs and growing more and more adult bees. So you have a peak population of bees when you have the peak flowers out in the field, so you can get to your peak yield of honey crop.
So Richard, what would you have for advice for someone who wanted to just get into beekeeping as a hobby?
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult than you think. So you want to educate yourself. You have to take a course because you can do more damage than good. A lot of people say, oh, I want to get into bees because I want to save the bees. The best thing you can do is take a course, understand the biology of the bee, and know that you have to treat this kind of as a domesticated animal. You can't just put a box of bees in there and just walk away and let them do their thing, because you could be promoting the spread of disease, you could be promoting the growth of pests on those bees, which will then spread to other people who are trying to make their living off of this. So yeah, it's a great, very cool thing. You can learn so much from bees. That's why I got into it. It's just a fascinating thing. You learn something new every year, but do it right. Don't think that your bees are going to be magically the ones that are healthy by themselves with no intervention. You have to be informed. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have someone that'll help you along the ways, because there's a lot of ways to kill those bees, and that's not what we want to be doing. We want to keep healthy bees and promote that in the industry.
So Richard, what are some of your favorite aspects of beekeeping?
Something that I never even thought about when it came to starting the career of beekeeping was the community. Because we have our hives on land of all these different farmers, and we have 130 different sites around our community here, and I never would have met these people otherwise. And now I get to know their story. I get to be part of their family. I'm their bee guy. You know, it's interesting. Then you can start to connect the dots from this family to that family. And you may know stories about each of them that you get from others that they don't even know about each other. Yeah. So it's a really cool thing. Some of these bee yards we have been bee yards for generations, and it really binds the community together, and it's really cool to be part of that. And it's not something I expected when I first started thinking about beekeeping.
So Richard, what are some plans you have for the future for Good Morning Honey?
One thing I'd like to focus on is having the ability to produce all the energy we need when it comes to harvesting the honey. So I'm talking like solar panels, battery capacity, and it's a huge investment. So I'm hoping to do that within the next year or two, and that would make us more sustainable, less relying on the grid, and it would just give me a peace of mind and save a few dollars at the same time. So that's one big key part that I'd like to implement here. When we are extracting honey, obviously we're using electricity. That's our peak use of electricity during the year, and that can lead up to thousands of dollars per month on your bill. And everyone knows power seems to be getting more and more expensive every year. So to go solar, that would help mitigate some of that, some of the unknown. One of the things that's hard to budget for is your electricity use. The power price fluctuates every year. It seems to be getting more and more every year. So that's why we really want to sort of take that out of the equation and get into solar so that we can have a known price to operating our business. And that, I think, will make us more reliable in budgeting and also a more sustainable business overall.
So thank you very much, Richard. I learned a lot from this, and I hope everyone else will. A lot of good information was shared. And thanks for sharing Good Morning Honey with us.
Thanks.